Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast. And today, again, I'm doing something a little bit different in that I got asked a question by a client yesterday in terms of what should I ask my solicitor when I'm getting into a property transaction, and what are kind of the generic questions that I want to be asking. I thought to myself, well, I could write out a long list. I could post it on social media. I could do something like that. I thought, you know what, this makes a good podcast episode. So what I've done, I've made a note of all of the questions that I've asked my solicitor on previous transactions. I thought, you know what, I'll list them out. We'll do a little bit of talking about each one and why they're important. And then this kind of gives you a checklist next time you go to your solicitor of the sort of things you want to be asking. So the first one is, are there any restrictions or covenants on the title that could limit my use of the property? Really, really important. There could be any number of covenants, right of access issues that you've got, and that there could just be anything that crops up within these land registry title documents that you need to be aware of. So really important one. The second one is, has the seller provided a full and clear title? Are there any pending disputes, charges, or notices? So sometimes this is kind of once you've got started in the transaction, this doesn't always come up, but you need that full and clear title, because if you don't have that, it's going to limit lending options. It's going to limit potential exit strategies. There could be issues. There might be possessory title. There's all sorts of different things that could come up. Disputes, charges, and notices, again, are a massive problem, because if you're not aware of those up front and you go into a transaction and all of a sudden you're in the middle of a dispute that you didn't know anything about, it can, again, cause massive issues with refinancing and potential saleability of that as well. The next one is the property leasehold or freehold? Obviously, this is a big one because you need to understand what you're getting. If it's leasehold, the next question you want to be asking is, how many years are remaining on the lease? What's the service charge and what are the ground rent? And are there any concerns around the service charge, or any concerns within maybe the agreement between the leaseholder and the freeholder? So you need to be aware of those as well. The next one is probably getting into a bit too much detail for a solicitor, but I think there's still important things to ask. So have there been any planning permission applications on the property? Is there any outstanding planning or building regulation issues? Again, a problem that you're going to find is if there are any building reg issues or planning issues, or potentially the other thing that has come up before is if there's planning for one use. So for example, let's say you're buying a property that's 2 flats. If all of a sudden you get into the transaction and go, hang on a minute, this doesn't have planning for 2 flats. This doesn't have any planning at all. This should be a commercial unit with uppers. You've got a big problem. And again, really affects your finance options and what you can do. The next one is, are there any potential risk of compulsory purchase orders, future development restrictions? So compulsory purchase orders aren't as much of an issue. I don't think you're really going to come across that, but it's the future development restrictions, especially if, for example, you're buying a bungalow with a plot of land. If there's a restriction on there that you can't develop the land, well, it kind of cuts out all of that development potential of being able to split the land and dealing with it. This one, probably more of a planning consultant question, but worth asking your solicitor anyway, just in case. And it's, is the property in a conservation area, or is it subject to Article 4? So you need to understand that if you're looking at doing HMOs, for example, or if you're looking at doing maybe a decent size commercial conversion, for example, that's going to come up as well. Then you get into your searches. So this is kind of taking it back a step and almost understanding the process as opposed to sort of asking a question. But you want to ask, what do local authority, environmental, water drainage searches actually reveal? Are there any flood risks, contamination, or subsidence issues? And that's kind of the question that you want to ask, is what's coming up. They will, once the searches are back, do quite a lengthy letter. I've done a number of them back when I was a conveyancer, sort of 3-4 pages of really running through the searches in a good amount of detail. So I think it's, they're bloody big letters. So worth going through that with a fine tooth comb and kind of understanding whether anything's come up in those searches. Whether your solicitor's going to know this or not, again, it's a question worth asking, might come up in the searches, but it's, are there any nearby developments or infrastructure projects that are going to affect sort of the property that you're purchasing? Then when you get into kind of the tenancies and everything else, it's, if the property's already tenanted, you need to understand if the tenancy agreement is okay, whether you're going to have any issues with buying a property that you then can't get the tenant out of. That all needs to be done by your solicitor. Are there any outstanding tenant disputes, arrears, eviction risks, for example? Has the deposit been correctly registered in the tenancy deposit scheme? Because again, you don't want to be responsible for that if that then comes up as well. So then you're going to start to talk to your solicitor maybe about the financing, maybe any additional costs, for example. So this question is really important. Are there any hidden or unexpected costs, such as overage payments, chancel repair liability? That will come up through a chancel search. So that is to kind of explain that in the best way I can, I mean, having only come across a couple, is a chancel repair liability is your liability in the local area of a church to be responsible for repairing that church. So there could be a cost there. And are there any indemnity policies that need to be put in place? So there'll be a cost there as well. The next one is, what are my stamp duty implications? Is there going to be sort of any additional above the standard rate? Are you going to have maybe some multiple dwellings relief? Is there going to be some second home surcharges? Is there going to be any of that sort of stuff? You need to understand that from a stamp duty perspective. And then the other bit is, are there any existing mortgages, any secured loans or restrictions on the property that need to be cleared before you purchase? Now, obviously there, as part of the purchase, the vendor is going to clear any existing mortgages and things like that, but you need to understand if there's any restrictions on the title, because your solicitor needs to obtain an undertaking from the vendor solicitor to clear those at completion. So that needs to be brought up fairly early. And then if you're getting into HMOs, this is, again, whether this is a solicitor question, I think it's worth asking, but does the property require an HMO license? Should do. Does it already have one? Are there any implications around that as well? And then the other bit is, does the property comply with all the fire safety and HMO regulations? So some of this you're going to have to do yourself, but the solicitor can ask the vendor solicitor to have a look as well. And then when it comes to kind of auctions and things like that, there are some key questions that you want to ask, which is, what are the key risks with this transaction from a legal perspective? Kind of what is going to come up? What could be a problem? What do I need to be on the lookout for? Are there any issues that are going to delay completion? How do we mitigate them? How do we get ahead of them? Are you going to go on holiday, my solicitor? Are you going to disappear for 3 months? Are you going to disappear for 3 weeks? Are you going to forget to hand the case over? How do we deal with these? How do we mitigate these early on? And then you want to understand, what are the key milestones that we need to be hitting? What do I need to do to get to those milestones? What information do I need to provide you? How do we get to completion as quickly as possible? So I think that's kind of a list of probably about 18, 19 questions that I think are all relatively standard questions. I think as you go through each transaction, you're going to find that these questions kind of answer themselves to a certain degree. And once you've used the same solicitor a couple of times, you don't need to be asking these on every transaction. But I think if you're relatively new to property investment, if you're relatively new to developments, these are the questions that you need to be asking of your solicitor when you sort of first engage with them, in order to check kind of, and whether they've got that knowledge to kind of push you forward. So hopefully you found that really useful. And like I said, I'll post the link below for obviously anyone to have a look through the list and download it, and obviously use it next time you speak to a solicitor. But thank you for listening. I'll catch you on the next one.